Mistborn was written by Brandon Sanderson, so you know it's gotta be good.
This is the introduction song. It's not very good, but it's not too long.
I'm seriously not joking when I say that. I only started to become familiar with this guy and his work around last year, less than a year ago, and so far he has been batting 1,000. I mean, the Stormlight Archives is amazing, Elantris was great, and now Mistborn is off to an amazing start as well. I mean, this guy is up there with George R.R. Martin in terms of subverting the fantasy genre and finding completely new ways to tell stories and new characters to explore. It's really great. But enough about his work as a whole. You're here to talk about Mistborn specifically. And this one is actually the book that made him a big author. Like, after Elantris came out, that one did moderately successful for a first-time author, but then Mistborn came out and took off, and that's what allowed him to become the huge phenomenon that he is now. And it really deserves it. Because this one is interesting not even just in story or characters or anything, but in just the concept. The concept alone is great. I'm gonna back up a little because the sun is reflecting weird off my glasses. Sorry. So the concept of this is that 1,000 years ago, a pretty standard fantasy story took place where, like, a hero who was a nobody comes out of nowhere and he's the subject of a prophecy and he goes off on a quest to save the world. But he fails, and then, some sort of darkness took over the world, and now the world is ruled by this immortal demigod named the Lord Ruler. Or maybe he is actually a god. I don't know. They don't really explain it at first. And so, now the majority of the world are these people called Ska, and they're basically slaves to a handful of nobility and the Lord Ruler, and that's it. The world sucks. And the main character of this story is a young girl named Vin, who has lived her whole life on the streets, basically. She's a petty thief, she just steals her food, she's a nobody, basically. And, but she does have this one strange power that she doesn't really understand, which allows her to make people nicer to her. Like, she calls it her luck. Like, when someone's angry at her, she just uses a little bit of her luck and they become less angry, and suddenly they're a little nicer. So then this guy named Kelsier finds her, and he tells her that she is something called a Mistborn, and so is he. And she actually has a lot more powers than just what she was using, and so he starts teaching her about how to use them, and he brings her up off the streets and gives her a better life, but on the condition that she helps him overthrow the Lord Ruler. So just by taking, like, a standard fantasy story, and then changing a little bit at the end and moving it forward 1,000 years and just seeing what the world would be like and what would happen, this book automatically stood out a lot to me. Like, I think I was around 100 pages in before I really realized that that's what was happening, and it really got me. Because, I mean, I liked what was happening before that, but then once I realized what it was doing, it just immediately grabbed my attention, and that's what held me for the rest of the book. But beyond that, the plot here is still really good and interesting. Like, it's the only part of the book that I would say is a little bit weak comes at the climax, and even then, that's not bad at all. Because the majority of the book is Kelsier and Vin, they're preparing to overthrow the Lord Ruler. It's not just a regular rebellion like you would see in most of these other stories. It's done in the form of a heist, because Kelsier is a thief, and Vin sort of is as well. And so the majority of it is them, staking out the palace where the Lord Ruler lives, and they're trying to start up a war among the nobility, so Vin actually has to impersonate a noblewoman and try and gain information about them, and so that gives us a whole new perspective as well. And, she's also learning about her powers the whole time. How fast was that guy going? Jeez. But it's just a unique perspective on it. But then the climax comes and it feels more like just a regular rebellion that we've all seen before. I mean, it's not bad, it's just less unique than the rest of the book. The two main leads are also both great. Like, Vin, like I said, she starts off as, like, a scared little girl. Actually, no, that's not even fair to her, because she is scared, but she has reason to be. She lives on the streets by herself, and she's constantly surrounded by thugs and dangerous people, so she's learned to look out for herself, and she's very paranoid and doesn't really trust anybody. And over the course of the story, not only does she become a badass who learns to use her Mistborn powers really well, but she learns to trust people, and she learns to be a little kinder, and she learns to show mercy, and she actually helps change the people around her as well. So, and I mean, she's not dumb or anything either. She has flaws, sure, but they don't really make her annoying or unlikable at any points. Even when she was being a flawed character, you understood where she was coming from, and you still thought, yeah, okay, that was neat. Kelsier is really good too, but the main thing is that the majority of his development took place before the book begins, and so learning about him is really just learning his backstory, and as the book goes on, at least up until the end, it feels like he's pretty much the same guy, and again, he's cool and all. He is a badass, and you understand why he got to this point. You feel like just how much anger he has bubbling inside of him, and how a lot of his plans, like he talks about, hey, liberating the ska and freedom and all that, but you really do feel like a huge part of it is just revenge and or greed. And also another thing is that his backstory, you don't get all of the details until much later on, but I mean, as you're reading about it, they tell you the gist of it pretty early. You know, they tell you he was a prisoner who got caught and sent to this place called the Pits of Hathsin, where prisoners just mine ore until they die, and no one has ever come back from there, but he escaped. And it's really neat and all, but also there's not really that much extra information that's found there. So it doesn't feel like he got development quite as strong as Vin. But, and I know it seems like I'm complaining a lot, I'm really not complaining. He is a good character. He is fun, he is funny on occasion, but you also really do see that, yes, this is a deeply flawed, deeply hurt man who's just trying to do the best that he can with what he's given. All the supporting characters are good too. You know, there's really not that many of them, considering that this is fantasy, which I've noticed Brandon Sanderson does that a lot, and I'm pretty grateful for it. But yeah, this one doesn't have a huge cast, and so each character actually has unique personality, and you don't have too much trouble remembering their names, and like, it's just nice, you know. And they all get enough focus that I wasn't ever bored with them, and I never thought, oh god, this guy again. And there's always a little bit more to learn about them. You know, whenever you find out something new about a character, you never think, oh, this is out of nowhere, or oh, this is stacking on to a character who's already been fully developed. Like, no, it's really nice and neat to just have a cast that you enjoy reading about. And of course, it's Brandon Sanderson, so the magic system here is great. I mean, in this it's called Allomancy, and it literally works by people swallowing little bits of metal, like little bits of iron and copper and zinc and all that, and when it's in their stomach they burn it, and depending on what metal they're burning, it gives them different powers. It's really, really fascinating, because again, Kelsier and Vin are the only two that are Mistborn who can use, and they're people that can use all the powers, whereas most people can only use one or none. But each individual metal that you can burn that gives you different power has a lot of depth to it. I mean, there's pewter, which just makes you stronger, but there's a lot more to it than that. Like, it also makes you faster, it improves your balance, and you can flare it up at times so it makes you even more strong for a little bit, or you can just burn a little so that people won't even notice you're doing it. Like, there's a lot of depth, and there's a lot of creativity in each of these powers, which I'm not going to go into detail to now because I'd be talking forever about it, but it's fascinating to read about, and the information is given to you at just the right pace, so it never feels like it's going too slow and you really just want to learn more about it, like hurry up dude, and it never goes so fast that you have trouble keeping up. It's always, always, always the perfect pacing. I couldn't find any real holes in it either. Like, it seems very solid and very well thought out. Nothing else to say, really. I mean, it's a fantasy book that subverts a lot of tropes. It's dark without being edgy, which is even more impressive when you consider that this came out in 2006, and pretty much every fantasy book in existence that came out at that time was trying to be edgier than the last one. So, you know, it's nice to just see something like this that's a lot different than most things that were coming out back then, and a lot of things that are coming out now even. And like, again, pretty much the only people that wouldn't like this are people that just don't like fantasy at all, in which case I can't blame you, or people that would really just want to read a more traditional fantasy, like Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time style fantasy. Like, if that's what you're looking for, you probably wouldn't like Mistborn because it's a lot different and it might just seem strange and out there to you. But to me, this was the perfect mix of things that are familiar and things that are strange. So, yes, to me this book was fantastic. It was great. I loved it. I had trouble putting it down, etc., etc. And if you like fantasy at all, go ahead and check it out.